So Terry, thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you very much.
One of the things that I'd like to do is have you explain a little bit to the audience about your company and about the kind of products that you make. Something about just this geographic spread, that sort of thing. What would you like them to know about EG?
Well, EG Industries is, we were founded in 1981. Our first plant was in Florida. Um, we're an plastic injection molder. We started primarily as an automotive company, and we've since diversified into medical and commercial, industrial goods, as well as automotive. I'm in charge of the automotive division from a program management standpoint. Um, Geographically, we're in Georgia, Michigan, Ohio, New York, and Florida. And we have a plant in Ontario, Canada.
Okay.
So,
So it sounds like with that kind of distribution that, collaboration and, being able to get access to information becomes critical even when it's not a pandemic, I would imagine.
yes, it's very critical. It's a lot of what we do in program management is time sensitive. So,
Yeah. Well, can you say anything about, do you generally do full service, including design work for the OEM customers that you serve, or do you do, build to print, or what's the process at EG?
we have the capability to be a full service supplier. Primarily, I would say probably 80% of what we do is build to print. But we've got two programs right now where we're design responsible, and it does become more of a challenge when you're full service, for sure.
Can you say anything about what it is about being full service that you think is an extra struggle or an extra challenge?
It primarily it's just from from program management standpoint, it's the time involved.
Okay.
Where if you're build to print, it's easier. You know when the start of the program is going to be, and you know pretty much how long it's going to last. When you're designing the parts, you've got that whole extra step in there of approvals, to part design approval. That you've got the FEA analysis, and so that there's just more steps,
Right.
and every delay compounds down the line.
So as a program manager in that situation, the challenge is that when you're full service, you have just a much larger set of milestones that as a program manager, you're trying to track and make sure that they stay in sync with the goals of the program, right?
Right.
That kind of.
Yep.
One of the things that really, not being focused my entire career in the automotive industry, one of the things that surprised me when we started at Actify digging more into what were the challenges that people in program management were dealing with, it was interesting just how different that process is from almost any other manufacturing industry. So, for instance, if I was making bicycles, my marketing department would understand what a new market opportunity might be. I'd be able to, make an assessment about, what the product development costs would be. I could do the design work. I could start to source suppliers. I could do a lot of that activity. And, up until the point where I start shipping the first product, if I'm that manufacturer, I am in complete control of every decision that I make about the design, about which suppliers I source, about what milestones I meet, and so on. And in the automotive industry, it doesn't work that way. And I wonder if for some of the folks who maybe don't quite understand what that different looks like, just what is it that program management looks like at EG, and how is that difference creating some challenges for you guys that you're having to meet?
Well, first of all, the milestones are all set by the customer. So you're given basically a program timeline that you have to meet before you can put any of your variables in. And right now, with not just the pandemic, but the semiconductor shortage and things like that, launches and build events are being kind of scattered. Some are being moved forward, some are being moved back. So you're constantly juggling your timelines around.
Okay.
Where in the past, it was pretty much you have those milestones set by the customer in the beginning, and for the most part, they stayed the same.
Mhm.
So it's just that's not the reality today.
So that reality has changed dramatically just since we entered the pandemic period, is what I hear you saying, right?
Correct.
So how, when you think about program management, I think a lot of folks like to think that it's basically an engineering activity, but it's not, is it?
It's part engineering, it's part commercial, it's part quality. I mean, you're taking everything and you're managing the entire program. You're managing the budget, the timing, the quality, the quality components, the tooling components. It's all encompassing, which is one of the reasons that it's fun. And in some cases it's fun, in some cases it's very challenging.
Well,
You have to like a challenge to be a program manager.
it's funny you should mention that, because one of the things that that we experienced in going through this is, I think I recall it might have been a job posting for Dura Automotive. I'm not sure, but it was describing a position for a vice president of program management. And when you read that description, your first reaction, mine was, and so was the same as some of my colleagues, was, who in the world would want this job? It seems like an impossible task, because the situation you were describing was one where you need to know certain information related to milestones, but not a lot of depth behind that. But you need it in real time. You need to be able to know when something's happened, and then what the knock-on effect of whatever that event might be, how it impacts the rest of the program. And
go ahead.
Well, and go ahead.
I was just going to say the knock-on effect that's the real key.
Okay.
It may not be, the customer may delay something, but how does that affect everything downstream from that?
Right.
So
how do you do that today? I mean, how's that done today?
Pretty much manually. So if, say, we're doing it might be a program, but it's vehicle specific. So say you've got 10 tools, so 10 programs on one vehicle. If that vehicle gets delayed by 3 months, it's a manual process to go in and change all the APQP dates running out 3 months. And I mean, depending on the company, every company has a different APQP process, but it could be dozens of tasks or it could be hundreds of tasks. And so the more tasks you have in a phase, or it just compounds the problem. It can run away from you very quickly.
Yeah, we're doing having a similar conversation like this with someone that was the founder and part owner of a fairly large tool and die shop, but still just focused strictly on tool and die making, primarily for fascia, for body components and things like that. And one of the things that he was describing is that for each tool, okay, and you may have multiple tools for a single program, for each tool, the milestones involved was something on the order of 200 that needed to be tracked over a period of time. Is that fairly typical for something of that magnitude for you guys?
For tooling, if it's a large program, something like a fascia is pretty complex. Yeah, you could have 200, but for us, that's just a subset.
right.
So you compound that now into assembly fixtures, paint fixtures, all the other things that you have to track, and it just starts getting, it starts becoming a big beast.
Well, we're here at PowerPlex this week to talk a little bit about in a different forum, to talk a little bit about the solution that we have been developing to try to address some of this. And a big part of what we saw as the problem has to deal with, how do you get the visibility to when things change in some of those silos? So for instance, if there's data in ERP that's changed, rather than having to go, manually collect that, what we think the ideal situation is, it changes and it then automatically populates that change to the program management solution, which obviously if you're doing it manually, you can't do that. Is that sort of, integration, having the visibility of collecting data when it lives somewhere rather than sending people around to try to gather it up manually? Is that something you think is essential to be able to solve that problem?
I think it's essential. I also think that it's a lot safer process, rather than you send something out and somebody says, "Well, I never saw that," and which doesn't happen often, but every once in a while somebody gets amnesia, and then all of a sudden you're ordering components that have changed, and that change hasn't been sent down the line. So there's a lot. It would alleviate a lot of the checks and balances that we have to do today.
So would you describe, based on the experience you had in the industry, we were talking a little bit before we started this conversation about just, how many experiences we've had that seem similar like this. Do you think that this is a fairly typical situation with the rest of, the companies in the industry?
Yeah, I don't think that this is a one-off at all. It's a pretty typical problem that everybody, at least in my experience, we all seem to struggle with the same things.
So EG is a Plex customer, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And so how long have you been working with Plex?
Our first plant was integrated in 2011, and our last plant was integrated in 2014. Wow. So we've been with them for over 10 years now.
Yeah. And how have you found that experience to be?
So far it's been very positive. I know all the plants, they love it because they can do a lot of their structuring within that system, and they get instant feedback. So it's been very positive.
So if you were to envision, a solution to, the situation that we've been talking about, you would say that tight integration with ERP is a must, I would assume.
Yes, absolutely. That is something that actually I think everybody, that's like that's the magic that everybody's looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things we like to do is, you were talking a little bit earlier about, when things change, there's the possibility that somebody all of a sudden gets amnesia. And, that's an interesting situation, which I imagine can exist too with the OEM customers that you have, that if there's been a change initiated on that direction, and all of a sudden there's some confusion, how badly can things go wrong in that situation?
They can go wrong very quickly and very, very badly. You're saying that, and OEMs a lot of times, and it's like this everywhere, but a lot of times, say the purchasing people aren't talking to engineering, so engineering thinks you're working to one level, purchasing thinks you're working to another, and the two are not talking to each other at all. And so you've got different levels of math data coming out, and you don't know. engineering is expecting one level of parts, purchasing is expecting another, and that gets really messy very quickly. So it doesn't happen that often, but occasionally you find yourself shipping parts to the assembly plant. The assembly plant is expecting one level while you've never been kicked off to the new level. So they're getting old parts and then they don't fit the vehicle. So it gets pretty messy.
Yeah, and if you can't, I would imagine if you can't document the traceability of the change, right, that, you know, the impact could be that, you know, the supplier in that situation winds up being the one impacted on the cost.
We're usually, you know, we're usually put to blame, but you need a lot of traceability on, especially with math data when it comes in. You have to make sure that you're archiving the old stuff and only using the new stuff. In a past life, I did have a situation where tooling was kicked off to an old level, and we got the parts in, and that's when everybody realized that no, this was a problem.
We've heard a lot of interesting stories in having these conversations, and it's been really helpful because it informs the way that you try to build the product so that, you know, those sorts of things don't happen. I recall we heard one company, I want to make it clear to the people listening, it's not EG, it's a different company that we talked to, but in one place, in one situation, they'd actually won the award. They'd won the program award, but the business development folks somehow never let program management know. And the program didn't get kicked off for almost 30 days. So that schedule delay wound up being something that that particular supplier had to eat, you know, in terms of the impact to the customers came out of their margin on the contract, which is a tough thing to deal with, I would imagine, in a situation like that.
Sure was. That would be very, very tough.
Yeah. Well, what is it? It sounds like the thing that is really at the root of this is that because program management exists for that period between, you know, just prior to the contract award, you've got a business development side, you know, that's trying to do its best to put together, you know, a firm quote, you know, usually with a pretty limited amount of time available, a few weeks. And then you've got this, you know, 6 to 9 month period, maybe a little bit longer if you're a full service supplier, where, you know, you are trying to figure out how to, you know, build and deliver that on time and, you know, within the cost that you've got. But the task of trying to keep on top of all these different milestones is really sucking away all the time you have to be proactive, and you just wind up generally being reactive to whatever changes are happening. Is that a fair description of some of the challenges that you see?
Yeah, I mean, we try and not be reactive, but the reality is a lot of times that is what you're doing. I kind of expect my guys to be proactive.
Yeah.
But if something happens and they're not, and they're being reactive, I'm not going to get upset about it because I know from past experience it happens all too often.
But if we could reduce the amount of those incidents and take some of the burden off of being able, as you you know, mentioned, to be able to populate, you know, the impact of change through, that would give them a little bit more of an opportunity to kind of either take on more capacity for additional programs, or at least, you know, work the relationship with the OEM customer a little harder. Yeah.
It would, and it would also get them a few more hours sleep at night. But it definitely would help from a standpoint that yes, you're able to converse more with the customer, but you're also giving them a sense of, you know, what you're doing and that you're on top of things, where when you're reacting, they don't get that warm fuzzy feeling necessarily.
How important is that warm, you know, that part of, you know, we haven't talked a lot about that, you know, in past conversations, just about the impact of, you know, not having a clean way of managing that program, and the impact that has on the relationship with the customer. Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, if you're not doing well in program management, it's a direct reflection on your company, and your customer will wind up not sourcing you, either not sourcing you as much or just not sourcing you. So that warm fuzzy feeling they get from good program management is critical. It's absolutely critical.
Well, that sounds like, if I were to sort of characterize it as, you know, program management is where you win or lose business. Would you agree with that statement?
To an extent. I mean, there is now and there always will be the commercial side, which you're not going to get away from, and the quality. I mean, if you're not shipping good quality parts to the customer, you're not going to get any more awards. But a lot of that is going to come through good program management.
Well, Terry, it's been great to have you on with us today. It's been a great conversation. Is there any final thought you'd like to leave the audience with in terms of what you'd like to see, you know, in the area of program management tools before we sign off?
I'd love to see something that when my customer changes their dates, I can change my APQP quickly. That to me, that's critical because it would save my guys so much time.
Well, hopefully we'll provide a solution for that. But I think the more interesting thing is that this is an area that has been neglected for far too long. And I want to thank you for helping us educate the audience that, you know, this is something that suppliers should, if they're serious about digital transformation, they should be thinking about this. So thanks very much, Terry.
All right. Well, thank you, Dave. It was a pleasure.
Likewise. Have a good rest of your week.
All right. You too.